Hello, this is Thomas Keegan. Today is July 4th, 2012. And of course, this year we have an election cycle, I'm sure everyone's aware of. And today on the phone, I have Andrew Groff for US Senate. And he is running in, it was Delaware for the US Senate. And so we're pleased to have him on here. And again, libertarianprogressive.com, we're interviewing as many independents and third-party candidates that will be on the general ballot election as many as we can here, so people can make an more informed decision at least. And the way to do that is to know more of your options. And as it says here on Andrew's website, no vote is ever wasted. And so today is our 4th of July extravaganza here. We have Andrew. We do appreciate you being on the line here. And so we pretty much ask the same questions that we ask everybody. And the reason for doing that is because after watching some of these debates, you might notice some questions might go to this candidate, and then some other ones, and some you could even say are almost frivolous questions goes to the other candidates. And I've heard people say they wish, I heard the view. I wish I heard what the other candidate was going to say about that same question. And everyone can answer them differently. So Andrew, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad to talk to you today. Happy 4th of July, sir.
Same to you. Nice, great to be here.
Thanks. And now, a little bit about about yourself, if you wouldn't mind letting us and the viewers and the people that will be voting on you know a little bit about yourself and what got you started into this campaign. Have you run previously, sir? And what is your motivation? What drives you to put yourself out there so people can vote for you for U.S. Senator in Delaware 2012, sir?
Well, those are some big questions. I'll give you a little background. I'm a native Delawarean, so I was born and raised here, and to a couple of elementary school teachers. Went to the public school system here and through the University of Delaware. And after all that Delaware-ishness, after my wife and I graduated college, we headed up to New England, and we worked for a lot of shoe companies up there. We worked for the Stradride Corporation, and I worked for Nike and the Cohan division up in Maine for a while as well. And that took about 20 years to do that. And then when our daughter was born, we moved back toward family down here to Delaware, and I was also working for shoe companies and ready-to-wear companies down here in Delaware, the last one being a small ready-to-wear outfit that was started by a couple of University of Delaware graduates called Flapdoodles. It's a children's clothing company. And trying to keep them afloat, trying to compete in a world market where most of the goods are being made domestically. I've been involved in production and inventory planning and manufacturing planning internationally for about 20 years. Having offices in Florence, Italy, and in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and spending a good amount of time in China, kind of at the end of my shoe career, and seeing what was going on there. So I started my own business after Flapdoodles folded, and that was back in 2002. I have a computer consulting business here in Delaware. So I've been a small business person for about, it's be our 10-year anniversary here. Last fall, got involved with a group of people last September who wanted to start an Occupy movement here in Delaware, almost statewide. They approached me because of my background in working with communities and starting small groups or groups to have some impact on what they're doing. I was doing it at the corporate level in the way of organization development. And they asked me to help, even though there was kind of a process that they were going to be mimicking from the Philadelphia Occupy. I brought in whatever talents I could bear. And Occupy Delaware got set up and started occupying in downtown Wilmington, November last year. And they, believe it or not, are still up and running. They still have their tents, and they're still doing their protests and their assertions into the community. And that kind of raised my political awareness with what was going on. Not that I wasn't aware before. I've always been kind of a news addict. I like reading profusely at night. I'm up very late at night reading the international financial markets and news markets and things like that. I've always had kind of an interest in that. So that's a little background.
Well, Andrew, that sounds like a lot of good real-world experience. And, yeah, last November, maybe people were trying to occupy Delaware now. And just like the 4th of July, that spirit of independence, how about this November 6, 2012, people are trying to occupy the Congress, our Congress.
That's probably where I diverged a little bit from a lot of the Occupy people. They were trying to remain non-political, and I think there's some advantages to that. However, there was a few of us involved in it that decided that on our own that we needed to try to take this message down to Washington from a political point of view, and that's how.
After all, that's where the laws and the bills, I mean, that's where they decide which countries to go to war and put sanctions on. That's also where they decide tax policies and policies about your civil liberties. That's where they passed the National Defense Authorization Act, where you can be indefinitely detained. That's where they passed the Patriot Act. That's where they gave the bailouts in 2008 and beyond, and that's where a lot of stuff happens. So, yeah, we absolutely, I mean, the fruits of the Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, all of that has got to be getting some people into Congress. And now, one thing that would get a lot of media attention, I believe, is if we elected, you know, there's a lot of presidential politics this year too, of course, and every 4 years there is. But I really think that where the real battle is, per se, is in the Congress, and I think it's less overwhelming. It could be, because instead of having to worry about a presidential campaign, it's just your state or your district, and so the battle begins, and this is. You know, we're in July 4th. This is just about 4 months away here, and so let's look at some of the issues. I mean, if you're running, you have a platform. You know, big issues of the budget, healthcare, and actually, and foreign policy, and perhaps trade. Let's ask you, what do you what's your stance, or what's your thinking process? What's your goals and the policies that you would pursue as far as the budget's concerned, sir?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head with NDAA. If anything was a deciding factor in my throwing my hat into the ring here, that was a big part of it. I think the assault on a lot of our individual liberties that's going on in Washington right now resonates across the political spectrum, and is just basically an American ideal that is being trashed. So, you know, and it affects everything pretty much. So you've now laid on my doorstep a whole bunch of questions again, and let me try to answer them one at a time. Let's look at the budget. There's a lot of concern from many people about how our government is spending money and is financing, or a lack of financing, for what's going on there. And part of my platform is running as a Green. Many people are very concerned that Greens are, you know, quote-unquote tax and spend liberals. And I think they don't realize that there's a huge libertarian part of the Green Party that feels that our tax structure as it exists, or certainly as it existed before the Bush years, certainly seemed adequate, and that there wasn't any real reason to have a large expansion of the revenue base from the country, that there's plenty of money that's flowing into Washington right now, but it's essentially being wasted. It's spent on the special interest, moneyed interest, lobbyists, and it's not going to the proper programs that would really enhance our economy, enhance our country, and our competitiveness throughout the world.
You're saying pretty much the tax code that we had in the 90s worked. Is that fair to say?
Well, in the late 90s, I think that tax structure is pretty close. I'm not saying it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm saying that it kind of reflected a better balance between governments.
And that's not really an extreme tax code, really. It's not like, you're planning on raising tax rates to 60% and we're all going to live in some communistic communes or anything like that. I've actually taken a look at the Green Party platform and the Libertarian Party platform. The Libertarian one is interesting, only has like 10 planks on it, and they're all stuff that people can agree on. The Green Party one I also looked at, so I was just curious to see what it was about, and it's actually not too bad. I mean, the only thing I could imagine someone being a little bit worried about is some of the UN stuff, but it's a fair thing, and actually it's nothing that's I don't think too bad. But they do focus a lot on small business and civil liberties. Absolutely.
Relocalization, very similar to libertarians. Support of small business, getting out of these wars, refocusing our resources. They're all linked. I know when your initial questions were seemingly separate, but they're so interconnected. When we talk about foreign policy, we talk about trade policy, and we talk about the budgets. These things are not really separate and of themselves. They're intimately woven together, and that's not even separate from what's happening on our assaults on our civil liberties. And that's where, at least in Delaware, and particularly with the Occupy movement, there were many libertarians as well as Greens, as well as many other people from all walks of life and ages that came together on this. Delaware has the reputation, as a corporatist type of state, and certainly our laws are subject to question nationally because of some of our leniency and some of our corporate policies here. So Delaware can be the hotspot for this. It's a tough electorate to deal with, since most people do work in the large banks.
Well, at least it's in the United States, because it's better than going, to some of the other countries where they just have a. Well, I remember I set up a corporation. I mean, first thing they ask is, do you want to set it up in Delaware?
Exactly. There's some real advantages for a small business person to being organized in Delaware. There's no question about that. But when we talk about the national issues, they don't seem to point back to some of the policies that start in Delaware. We have more corporations organized here than I think we have voters. So it's quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, you're right. You're right in the thick of it there, Andrew. And now, I think you're correct. I mean, about all the issues being somewhat similar, because if you were in a debate and the media person asked you, okay, so Andrew, what would you do about the budget? Well, your first, a way someone could possibly answer it is how I would deal with Iran, and how I would deal with Libya, and how I deal with Egypt, and how I deal with the whole Middle East and Syria. I mean, from one perspective, we could do what we're doing now, where we're losing money, and that's self-evident by the $15 trillion in debt that we're in. And it's not just spending money that's creating jobs. Sure, it creates some jobs, but these are things that are destructive. We're building things. We're not building spaceships and solar panels and things like that and houses. We're actually building missiles and bombs and destructive things that get destroyed and need to be rebuilt up, and then we pay contractors 10 times more than what they're worth, and it hurts their competition, demoralizes the country. And then so that's losing money. That's a net loss. And then you can have a neutral system where we just ignore them, and at least we're not losing money, but we're not making money. And then so the more optimistic aspect would be, let's actually make some money off this whole thing, and maybe we could trade with those countries, and maybe both of us could win. It could be a win-win situation. I mean, so what's your? I mean, it sounds like I would have to guess being endorsed by Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, the Libertarian Party nominee, and the Green Party nominee, which is an excellent thing, and something I hope to see more common cause. Because those are the two groups that have organized enough to form different parties, and also do you think we need to put aside some differences for a while, and do you think there's priorities ahead?
Absolutely. That's what we've done in Delaware here. A lot of our independent and third parties, we meet together, we discuss. I wouldn't say we're colluding in a lot of things, but we used to have a capability in Delaware that was lost a few years ago called a fusion candidate, where a candidate could run representing a number of parties. And, of course, the current powers that be have legislated that out of existence.
I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's almost like a coalition-type candidate you would see in a parliamentary system. But I'd like to get back economically a little bit, because I think we tend to kind of parse things out a little too much, and we're not seeing the big picture of what's really going on in this world.
Absolutely.
And, we're looking at defense outlays, we're looking at the crisis in the financial markets. These things are all interrelated, and I didn't know that enough commentators are really boiling it down to its essence, in that for the last, I think probably more than 4 years, we've been in a financial war globally. And there's a number of factions globally that are competing at multiple levels, but primarily at the financial level. And I think we're seeing that play out. The interesting thing about being the world reserve currency is we have a bit of an upper hand with that, and that's why the dollar hasn't folded much to the dismay of many prognosticators who have felt that it was going to fold at any minute. But as long as
it should have already folded, in other words.
Well, by rights, yes, except that as an international means of exchange, the stakes are too high to even allow that to happen internationally. Even if it's a country that absolutely loathes the dollar, they realize that
we're too big to fail.
Dependent on it as well. So I think we have to really understand the world we're living in, and I think great commentators, Ron Paul, many other people who have spoken up to this issue. We have to understand that in terms of the United States economy, that's pretty much what's driving things right now, is this international financial war, plus the military industries. That's really our only, I don't even know if you can call it added value, as we do have an industrial infrastructure in this country, but it's eroding and deteriorating to the point where we're I think we're much more than 50% service-based. So that's a
depends how you want to define value. Yes, it's almost like a value-added tax. People are up in arms about the individual mandates, but we already have individual mandates when we have to pay for all these policies that are putting us in the brink. Well,
the policies aren't even country-friendly as an individual mandate when you really study it, where a true single-payer system, much like Medicare for everyone, would free small business to a great degree to do their business and not have to be experts at negotiating.
That's the point I never hear people bring up. I never hear them bring up that point, but that's hardly ever. I hear you bring that up right now. From a business perspective, I mean, what's one of the major costs why they don't hire new people? It's they have to pay for their health care, and why should we relate our work? I mean, we're already kind of dependent on our job for our income. Well, why make us even more dependent on health care? I mean, what are they going to do next? Tuck us in at night?
Well,
I mean, they shouldn't be anywhere.
An even bleaker picture. Most Americans, I'm talking about them, almost 99% have not received a real wage increase on the average in over 10 years. But then you look at where that extra money is. There is some growth in GNP in this country. It's small, but it's there. And where is it going? It's being transferred. Where in real terms, people are not making what they were making years ago. They're being asked to increase their contributions to their health programs every year at extraordinary degrees. So you've got stagnant wages, you've got increased costs, and where is that transfer going? It's going to insurance companies, which are a leg of the financial industry. It is financial warfare. And where is the productivity in that?
There's financial warfare on the U.S. citizens right now, I would say, not just around the world. I mean, we're at war with our own governments, pretty much.
Well, it seems like our own government is certainly at war with the working person in this country, and it almost feels like a purposeful lowering of the standard of income to try to attain some, I even hate to sound conspiratorial like this, but it almost feels that way, where we're trying to lower our standard of living to bring up other countries' standard of living. I don't think there's any explicit policy like that.
It seems like, yeah, and that could have good intentions.
We wonder at things like that.
Well, I think there have been plans, like I've heard politicians say they want to kind of until we equal out the the wages, that's the way to stop immigration. Until we equal out the wages, that's, and so I believe that is their plan, and then they eventually plan on them all going up, but that's doing experiments really playing with people's lives there.
Well, they're certainly impoverishing too many people here for this goal, and it's in the abstract, it seems ridiculous.
Well, what about Syria, Iran? Since all these issues kind of correlate together, Syria, Iran, the Middle East, NATO, that whole area, North Africa, East Africa. What do you think of? How should we? What kind of relation should we have with our fellow countries across the world?
Well, I think open trade and cooperation is the order of the day, but I think what's happening is we have so much pressure every few years since we've geared up our military-industrial complex to such a hyper level that the only good news from their point of view is that every few years we're blowing things up and have to replace those armaments.
But we don't negotiate with terrorists, do we?
Well, we haven't really even defined who a terrorist is. You and I could be considered terrorists right now, according to NDAA.
Right. I was saying that sarcastically because, we negotiated with Khrushchev. It might be good for the world to see, someone who knows where they stand and is principally strong, maybe to debate one of these guys. It wouldn't be a bad idea. Sometimes when people yell at each other, afterwards, sometimes they fight, but other times they, build some rapport. It might be a good idea to, debate Ahmadinejad and people.
Hey, I'm open to debate. I'm running against the incumbent, the Democrat Senator Carper here, and he has shied away from debating any of the candidates. We'll have an online debate on my Facebook site, available if they want to contribute. We have a number of means here. He's kind of holding tight. He's a career politician, and he wants to avoid debates, but speaking of, good heated debates, you should be at my campaign meetings when I have some of the libertarian people on my campaign staff and some of the Greens on my campaign staff get together and we sit around the table and
awesome.
It gets pretty interesting.
Actually, that's what it's to me. Some of the most important things is not whether we completely agreed together, whether we can discuss our issues and still have respect afterwards, which we don't see. And so now we definitely, if people don't know about the NDAA or the laws that have been passed these last 10 years or a decade almost, or maybe a little bit more, since the Patriot Act. We're supposed to have a right in this country to be innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. We're not supposed to experience illegal searches and seizures of our property, personal records, or persons. We do require an independent judge's approval. We don't have to incriminate ourselves. If we're charged with a crime, we should, this is habeas corpus here, know the charges, the evidence, and the accuser, as well as being accountable to a jury of our peers, not some secret tribunal, and to have a right to a fair, expedient, and trial, and the right to competent counsel, no cruel and unusual punishment, due process, not to be that's basically what you're saying, and people might think, oh, well, we have all that. Well,
it's encoded. It's being ignored by and large, or countervailed by current legislation that the Supreme Court seems reticent to overturn. So, I think we have a major, philosophical shift in government that they're not accountable to the people.
Do you know if your competitor voted for the NDAA, sir?
Absolutely. All of our representatives from Delaware nationally voted for it. 3 Democrats. It's unbelievable. And with heavy lobbying from people in Delaware calling their offices, telling them, do not do this, they went ahead and did it anyway. And people are just beside themselves. We have a very large Tea Party groups in the southern part of the state. We have very active liberal groups in the northern part of the state, and both realize the effect of these laws and are just livid. And that's, again, another opportunity for me to get in there and say that, hey, there is another way to look at this, that, we don't have to stick with the status quo. If it's not working, we need to change everybody out. So we're mounting very purposeful campaigns about this, and we have a very conservative-minded state.
I mean, what do those people that voted for it have against the American people? I mean, why do they not like their constituents?
The people, they have nothing but contempt for it. I think they think the American people are idiots. And
why do they hate us? I mean, shouldn't that be the litmus test right there? Anyone who voted to take away our rights like that, to have a Stalinist kind of indefinite detention, they need to go. I mean, I think that's beyond incompetence. That's contempt.
It's an absolute violation of the oath of office.
Yes, it is.
To protect and defend the Constitution as it exists.
Yeah, that's the litmus test right there. I mean, and that's a very low litmus test. And what would you? And the Patriot Act, I'm sure you feel have some feelings about that.
It's ridiculous. It's an absolutely ridiculous act. And look what's come out of it. We have more government police and this TSA thing. And I've had some people that I know who work in there, and I talk to them about their training. I talk to them about what they're expected to do, and they roll their eyes and say they can't believe what's going on with it as well. I think it's a make-work program. I really do. I can't see, again, we go back to value-added. Are we any safer? Have they ever stopped anything other than somebody trying to bring some toothpaste on board? Really, no, they've not stopped anything. There's no evidence that they have had any effect whatsoever on this kind of fantastical 1984-ish war on terror that we're in here.
Now, what would you envision a strong military to look like, sir?
Oh, my goodness, a strong military. We're orders of magnitude ahead of a strong military. We should be able to defend the country. We should be able to aid our friends. But I think these wars of conquest and these resource wars we're in the Middle East are counterproductive. I think it's just like bad science, where we're putting more in than we're getting out or even can hope to get out. We're doing all these things, and we're monkeying around in other countries' affairs, and, maybe they'll be okay, maybe they'll not. The jury's not back yet on, and certainly Iraq isn't looking real promising, and watching Egypt, we don't know where they're going.
Yeah, the whole place might,
if you destabilize something, you get instability. So, in that order, we're out of chaos. We're getting chaos out of chaos.
Well, people should look up an interview from, I think it was 2020, with Paul O'Neill, the former Treasury Secretary in the Bush administration, who said they were making the plans for Iraq even before 9/11 on how they would divvy up Iraq and split it up and give the contracts to different oil companies. Mm-hmm. I mean, people might have heard me say this before, but I believe, if we can trade with China and some of these other countries, we could trade with these countries. They would be more dependent on us. And after 9/11, a lot of people don't realize Iran was one of the first countries to offer their services, and this was on the news, and the Bush administration just ignored them, basically told them to get lost. Now, they might have said other things behind the scenes, but if we could trade with these countries, maybe if Iran would be competing with Iraq, would be competing with Russia, would be competing with South America, I don't think they would be able to raise oil prices and hurt us, because they would have so much competition around the world, and we probably would get oil prices for a lot cheaper than what we've already spent in our...
Well, you can look back, speaking to your theme here, back to the Cold War and with Russia. And we essentially won the Cold War, certainly with Reagan's excess military spending making them bankrupt, but also from a popular standpoint, and I hate to say it, with blue jeans and rock and roll, the Western lifestyle was very appealing to.
Well, Sun Tzu's Art of War, I mean, says, you have to have the moral high grounds. I mean, that's what he said, at least, and I know a lot of military people read that.
Exactly, and I think there has to be a very justifiable reason for any kind of aggressive tendencies, and if without the moral high ground, you always lose one way or another. And I think culturally, I hate to say we're losing, it's hard to say, but we're certainly not gaining any notoriety, except that countries are, particularly in Europe, are folding up like a house of cards, and kind of makes us look a little smarter only because of their ineptitude, but I don't think we're really putting a positive...
Now, I think sometimes we focus too much on like what's wrong, and instead we can be showing more what's right. Now, we do have to know what's wrong before we can fix a lot of these things, but on your website I noticed it said A New Hope. Is that correct? And
I think you have to look forward. You have to plan for the future. You just can't criticize. You have to know, as you said, you have to know what's wrong, but then you have to make purposeful plans for how you're going to move forward. And I don't see much of that going on coming out of Washington, certainly not at the Senate level. It's completely reacting to the mood of the day, and there's no really concerted effort to put together a program, either from the government and as a kind of writing motion for the economy. I think they're wallowing in this chaos right now in our financial markets, and wallowing in the international chaos, political chaos in the Middle East, and I don't think anybody's really risen above that or set a direction that we can at least exemplify where things should be going.
It's probably, and it's just my personal opinion, that we have too many Democrats and Republicans in there. But now, what now what do you think about? You talked about single payer health care. I mean, basically Medicare for all, right? Now, if people still wanted like a private option, I'm sure they could get it. It could be kind of like the post office, where it pays for itself pretty much. And the post office is not in debt; it's a solvent because you buy your stamps and things like that.
Right. Well, it's a model that's been used
help
throughout
business.
the world for single payer. Sure, it absolutely aids small business development. Again, it's one less thing.
Even large business, it would help. It would help all businesses if they didn't.
At every level, absolutely, and that brings back better global competitiveness, because our competitors overseas have single payer or national health care, and they don't have to deal with it. Japan is a shining example where they have a version of Medicare for all. You pick your doctor just like Medicare here, or just like the kids do in the S-chip program, and you just eliminate the insurance companies, which sap the energy out of business. They literally raid these businesses by raising rates every year at an uncontrolled level. I mean, there's no entity in this world that increases its cost, increases its billing the way our health insurance has.
Yeah, you're right. The insurance companies are like hip with the banking system and the financial industries and the derivatives markets and everything. What about, a lot of people might, because it's a growing segment, want to know about alternative medicine. Should people be prevented from laws being able to use, vitamins and natural remedies and things like that?
Why?
Or have to get a prescription for vitamin C? Should I have to go to the Should I have to go to the doctor and say, I'd like to, can you please write me a prescription for a multivitamin?
Yeah, you'll see on my website it's a very kind of abstract assessment of what I call corporeal sovereignty. And it basically puts it right back on you. Like, what do you want to do? I mean, you can employ Western medicine, Eastern medicine, herbal, holistic. It's your body. It's your life. And you should have complete sovereignty over the direction you take with your life. As long, again, getting back to that libertarian principle, as long as you're not infringing on somebody else's.
Right.
And I'm fully in favor of that. And that kind of addresses a whole lot of different things, from the abortion issue to marijuana use and to
industrial hemp. I mean, so imagine, do you think that could have, I mean, that could be useful for a lot of our farmers, making ethanol and fibers and construction materials.
It's amazing. We've made a plant illegal. It just blows my mind. It's the only plant that's illegal.
We import $400 million of it.
And it's the largest agricultural product in this country, measured by dollars. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of silliness there. And again, I think it gets back to the moneyed interests. Certainly the pharmaceutical companies aren't real excited about marijuana oils or extracts,
Well, there's two things I think about that. In one sense, the pharmaceutical companies, they're horrible. I mean, they want us to buy their medications where we can't even negotiate the prices with that Medicare Prescription Act that was passed under Bush. We have to buy, they set the prices basically, and they're bad because, they have a lot of their lobbyists inside Washington working for the FDA, and they are thinking about doing things like restricting vitamins. I don't think that will pass, but one thing I will say that they have to put up with is they do have to pay millions of dollars before they can even get a drug onto the market.
I did spend some time with Pfizer up in Connecticut. I didn't work for them, but I certainly I was interviewing with them. This was years ago, and we were talking about how many compounds they need to go through before they can find one that even possibly can come to market. So I understand their cost structures, and we need to keep the research and development going. But I do hesitate to victimize the pharmaceutical companies. But I think we are subsidizing the rest of the planet when we have to pay the top shelf prices for all this stuff, and other countries who do have large collective negotiating abilities that we don't have here are able to come in and get the same drugs just across the border in Canada, then Americans have to pay twice or three times as much the price.
Now, what about, now this is kind of like what you're saying. I think a way to kind of be able to have some fusion between the libertarians and progressives is, we all pretty much agree with these civil libertarian rights, like anti-NDAA and anti the Patriot Act. And in fact, there's plenty of people, and this was just in the news. There are people that were in the CIA and FBI warning us about 9/11. It's not like we didn't have the capability to defend ourselves. It's just that we ignored all the clues. So maybe we should focus on ways of not ignoring those clues, real concrete steps like cockpit doors in airplanes that don't violate people's rights. That's all that we really needed, and listen to some of the people. In fact, we promoted some of the people who failed and fired and made demoralize people to where they wanted to quit. The people that were warning us about this, those would be the real solutions. But basically the fusion between the two is, again, the civil liberties, and this, to me, the libertarianism is it's kind of like the Declaration of Independence. It's the spirit behind the law. It's a goal that you want. And then the progressive side is, if you can do things that, number one, pay for themselves, benefit everyone who wants to participate equally, and if you can make it voluntarily, I think that's how you can fuse those two factions.
Well, we get back to language is what I'm finding when calling myself a progressive or horrors upon horrors a liberal or something like that. I think the American public has been sensitized to some degree for the last 15 years that somehow the word progressive or the word liberal is somehow this horrible thing that path we must not go down. But if I ask people, would you like to see things get better? Would you like to see growth? And would you like to see, more comfortable living, better standards for everyone? Real progress. People are like, sure, everybody wants progress. But then when you add the little IVE at the end, and progressive, there's a real visceral emotional reaction that the media has, or some elements of the media has instilled in people that's somehow a horrible thing that we can't, we just shut down as soon as we hear the little IVE at the end. So I've tried to rework that language into such where I start out a lot of speeches, even to Tea Party groups, very conservative groups of people. I'll go out and speak to anybody and let them know, do you want your children growing up with clean air, with clean water, with in a nice environment, in good schools and things like that. And I can't get anybody to say, no, I don't want any of that.
Well, I mean, and that's looking forward. I mean, right now, it's just to the point of, survival. I mean, it reminds me, not to be too dramatic here, but if you've ever seen that movie Braveheart, where you have the different factions, and they might not have always liked each other, but they combined together to fight like a bigger enemy, per se. And so it's, I mean, who else believes in, against free speech zones that believe like the whole United States should be a one big free speech zone? Who else is going to champion?
Aren't we supposed to be?
Yeah, we should.
How did that happen that we even have to discuss it?
Yeah. I mean, it's issues like that, internet privacy, and now one thing that might be that might have different opinions on the two different sides is the Second Amendment. Well, what do you, and not always. I mean, I've heard some Green Party people totally for like gun rights, but what do you feel about that?
I'm fine with the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner, and I enjoy target shooting and archery and all kinds of things. I've never seen it be a major problem in my experience, and I've lived in major metropolitan areas, and I've lived in the countryside, and I've lived in suburbia, and it's just kind of a non-starter for me. I think the way the law is written and the way we've dealt with it. I mean, obviously there's been some amendments to it over the years, but by and large, I think gun ownership is fine. I think all the people that I've ever met that own guns are very responsible people. Actually, they're super responsible, because I know when I'm handling a pistol, if I'm handling a rifle, I'm being extremely conscious and extremely careful with things, and I think,
So you don't see any need to, pretty much the status quo, you don't see the need to pass any new legislation, and some status quo positions are okay. I mean, like not everything is totally bad. Now, is that fair to say, sir, or?
I think we get back to the localization issues on this one. We kind of, have to come full circle and say, what does the community want? And I think if New York City decides they don't want guns in New York City, I think they should have the ability, the populace, to say so. Whether I agree with it, not living in here in Delaware, really kind of begs the issue. It's really what do the people want in that area? And if
more a local issue. That makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't completely violate the Constitution, which there's a little bit of gray area here. What is a regulated militia? Is that the National Guard, or what is that? So I think that needs a lot of clarification.
Well, I would say this. I mean, it was written on. It's part of the Bill of Rights, and I mean, if the consider this, and then I'll go to a different topic. But the military probably wouldn't need a law to give it the right to bear arms. I mean, it would have to be written for the people, because it would just be assumed that the military would have guns, right?
Sure. Well, you got to understand the National Guard is ostensibly under, state control. Yeah. I mean, obviously we know that may not be the case in all times, but certainly that is our state militias. But now I think there's a big movement afoot militarily to make that not the case. I know it was challenged during the Bush administration. I haven't seen a big challenge in this current administration, but that's always been a point of contention.
There's a lot of, so let's talk about immediate improvements of the quality of living. Do you think, would you vote to, what about people that are in prison right now for only, without any other things? I mean, if you still, commit assault or battery or fraud against one of your fellow citizens, you should, pay some kind of punishment for that. But, I mean, if you've done nothing else but just hurt, and it's someone could say hurt yourself, arguably, doing drugs, do you think, we should go through case by case and start freeing some people?
Well, I think we've got a number. You're hitting on a number of issues there. One of them certainly is the war on drugs and the war on users and people using harmful drugs, heroin and cocaine and things like that, really hard drugs. That's a medical issue. That's not a justice issue in my mind. We have other issues such as these three strikes issues, which are
right.
Also big problems in the states, and how they're affecting some subdivisions of communities.
Well, that's corporate welfare, because a lot of private prisons lobby Congress for three strikes and you're outlaws, so they can get more money.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the other thing. I don't particularly agree in private ownership of prisons. I think the motivation, we just had a...
That's a horrible industry to want to... Yeah.
And the children, in a youth detention facility. I don't know if you're familiar with the case of the judge who was loading up.
That was in Pennsylvania, I think, yeah.
I think we have to be very careful with the market. Not that I think the market's a good thing for a lot of things, but not everything.
But that's not the free market.
We don't want free market fire companies, or police forces, because, they just don't...
Right, or the military, like Blackwater and these companies, which have committed atrocious crimes, and they're not accountable. Like if they need someone to do some dirty deeds that aren't accountable to the Constitution, they can hire a corporation. It's a way to avoid accountability. Really, isn't that the whole thing of corporations? It's a way where you can't get sued, and you can just let the it's like a cat having 9 lives or something like that.
Well, we still have a very large presence in Iraq militarily, but not through.
And we're paying them about twice as much as we're paying our regular soldiers.
Exactly, or more.
Yeah.
Way more. The mercenaries are making tons more than our regular soldiers, and they get to choose their battles. Our soldiers don't necessarily. So
that's.
Yeah, I think privatization of some of these areas is it's a slippery slope. It's a really tough.
Well, they call it. That's not. Isn't that? I mean, all right. So the one thing that I think needs to be clarified, and someone like you can do it, is being endorsed by Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. Is that Occupy Wall Street blames everything on. Or typically, and I'm talking in general. I know probably most of them don't. This is from the media pundits' perspective that we need to break through, is that they blame it all on capitalism, and this isn't capitalism. When corporations like private prisons, that's corporate welfare. When they get paid not from our voluntary transactions, they're getting money from the state. I mean, if it wasn't for those purchases from the state, they wouldn't be in business. They wouldn't be able to survive. Same with the bailouts. At the same time, people are calling, like Obama's plan and stuff, socialism. That's nothing. That's farthest thing from socialism. Socialism, a true socialism, would actually be Medicare for all or something like that. But not some. So what we have actually is technically fascism, the merger of corporation and state. Now, we've separated religion from state. And it wasn't because people didn't like religion. It's because one thing they wanted to protect it is because it's a big organization that has a lot of power and a lot of influence, and it's made up of people who aren't perfect, and absolute power absolutely corrupts, or per se. And aren't corporations the same kind of threats as the past religions?
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. People are, and when I speak to a lot of these groups, particularly Tea Party groups, because they are very concerned about socialism, again, because they've been conditioned through the media to deal with that if they think they're getting towards socialism, or that Obama is somehow has a socialist agenda, they need to understand their terms a little better, because I think you're right. I think that the linkage between corporations and the state is too intimate at this point. I think the banking industry is a service industry. It is a utility, and it should be regulated as a utility.
Money is the biggest thing. I mean, if water is considered a utility, then and the national defense, I mean, even libertarians would agree that our national defense is part of the commons, right? That we shouldn't have private national defense. I mean, all of them say there is a place for the government, like the justice system and defense. Well, wouldn't money be just as important as our justice system and defense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The full faith and credit of the United States is at risk, and certainly it's come into extraordinary doubt these days based on the current policies and machinations of our banks.
I mean, how do we pay for the military?
We've so infected this world internationally. We brought up the subject of derivatives and this clandestine banking that's happening internationally. I know for a fact, I used to associate with some of these people in these large financial industries years ago, and I kind of have a feel for the culture of that group. And they really feel post-national. They don't really feel an affinity toward any one particular country because they work so much internationally, and I can relate to that. I did as well. But I never felt that I wasn't an American. I always felt that I was, being an example of America when I'm in Brazil or China or in Europe or wherever I'm doing business, where I would talk to these international financial people, and they really felt that they were a little bit above that. And there is this subculture with that group that we call Wall Street. They're really not on Wall Street anymore. They're all over the place. But there is kind of a subculture, and they don't really have America's interests at heart. They only have their own financial interests.
Yeah, you have to love yourself before you can really love others, I think, also. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being proud to be an American and things like that. I mean, you can take pride too far, of course, but nationalism too far. But at the same time, I mean, it's if you're really talking about being honest and self-aware, we do have to take care of ourselves before we can even think about how we might want to, tell other countries how to vote and stuff like that, like electronic voting. I mean, that's something. Do you think there should be a paper trail for our votes?
There better be.
Yeah.
As somebody intimately involved in the tech industry,
right?
Yes. Yeah, undoubtedly yes, because I've worked with these systems long enough to know of their weaknesses. As I tell my students, I'm an adjunct professor at the local college here in computer science. It's just ones and zeros, and you get the right combination of them, you get the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, they're having people hacking, now they're bringing drones into the U.S. because, they're like, oh, okay, you want us to pull out Iraq? Well, we need a place for all these drones, so let's send them to your local police station department and sheriffs. And there's people, so they plan on having, in the news, reported about 30,000 drones flying overhead, and people are able to hack those.
I demonstrated that last week. I think a group from the University of Texas hacked some drones right there.
And so, I mean, someone, might hack them, and eventually, I mean, eventually those drones are going to have some kind of weapons on them. I mean, eventually I mean, I don't know where the line is in the sand. I mean, where the boundary is here. I think the NDAA or the Patriot Act should have been it, but I guess we'll see. And I think this year is a year. I mean, November 6, 2012, we can have a new hope, start a new chapter on this, perhaps start this, like what Warren Harding said, a return to normal instead of a new normal. And that was after World War I. Now, it's some other issues like, another kind of a fun issue, I think. NASA, do you think, what do you think about outer space and the future as far as that goes, sir?
There's a lot of benefit to public expenditures on research and development. Our entire computer industry was derived initially from, efforts with the ENIAC back at the end of World War II, but certainly the NASA program really developed a lot of the capabilities and uses and applications of computer science. So there's a large public benefit that is derived from some of these science fiction-y kind of research things that goes on. Now, should we establish a colony on Mars next year? I don't know about that. But I think taking those kind of problems that exist as we know them and trying to work and engineer towards solutions has real-world practical applications. And I think that's what's made, at least in terms of technical development, America almost second to none. We're just slamming on the brakes and stopping all funding for that. I don't know that the private sector at this point is comfortable enough or is doing that level of research to kind of meet that new frontier out there that we're looking for technologically, in terms of energy efficiencies and transportation.
When we discover new things because of R&D that the taxpayers have funded, either whether we give grants to universities or we directly fund things like NASA, which also might give grants. And I think part of the DNA project was funded with, our technology. Should only a couple of corporations be able to benefit from that public R&D budget? Or, if we do make breakthroughs with R&D, should that be open to the whole private sector and even small and mid-sized businesses?
Well, here's where we get back to, we have to zoom the camera back out. What we've got in research and development now is a lot of subsidies going to private industry. hopefully for some kind of research that leads us into the future, the millions and millions that are sent to Exxon and other energy companies for research and development. But we also have those companies turning around and contracting with universities for research and development. They're actually not doing their own work. They're just recontracting it or going with a different grant process. So we have this kind of dichotomy of these resources and how they're being applied that are going from the public sector, from the government, to the private sector, say in Exxon, and Exxon's turning around and funding state universities or private universities for certain levels of research. And we're adding a lot of layers to the onion there, and I'm wondering about the efficiency of that funding process. It used to be in the good old days where universities would get grants, professors would get grants to do their own research, and it wasn't necessarily dependent or subservient to corporations. And we're finding that right now, the research that's happening at the university level is quite subservient to corporations, as they are the leading funders of that research. So they are pointing that research in the direction that is consistent with their corporate goals, which is fine. It's what they're paying for. But with full knowledge that there might be other things, just basic research, pie-in-the-sky kind of research.
Yeah, so doctors are prescription pushers, because that's what they've been influenced.
Same reason. It's coming from the corporate. So we get back to the corporate to state type of thing.
Right.
And I think it's a problem when it's all one thing. If it's all corporatist, bad. All state, bad. I found in business, in my personal thing, that a mix of a lot of different things always seems to bear the best fruit, that it's not all one way or another, but it's a good, healthy mix and a good competitive environment for ideas that creates the most creativity and the most breakthroughs, that it's not being dictated from one side or another.
Well, besides a single-payer system, what else do you think could help small businesses and mid-sized businesses?
That's a huge one. As you understand, those costs have just been skyrocketing. I mean, I think that in and of itself just might be enough of a touchstone.
Yeah, that'd be a huge thing.
Things. I think the government, and again, I'm speaking as a small business person. I've been running my own small business for 10 years. I've really had no government interference or any problems, and I've had a lot of help. So, and not even anything that I've gone out and asked for. So I don't think there's any real barriers to entry to anybody starting a business other than their ability if they need some kind of financing. So we have problems in the banking system where they're holding on to capital and they're running their own in-house casinos rather than investing in the private market. I think that's a big piece of it.
So do you think that should be taken over by the Treasury departments?
What, nationalize the banking system?
Yes.
I'm not fully into there. I think we just need better rules on the back of the cover to the Monopoly set here. I think, everybody knows that if you play the banker in the game of Monopoly...
Right. Well, what about a full audit?
I think things should be absolutely transparent. Again, I get back to the utilitarian or utility concept of banks, and not that they can be some entities in and of their own selves, that they do serve a public good, and that they, as corporations, are chartered by the government to do just that. So I think
from being a Green Party candidate, I mean, what do you think about the fair tax, where it's just you get rid of income tax, it's just a sales tax, and then there's vouchers for people who make under a certain amount? Do you have any?
Again, I think there's problems with that. I've seen VAT systems, I've seen national sales tax systems, and what I've observed is the layer in a national sales tax like a VAT or like they're talking about in the Green Party. And again, through the convolutions of Congress, nothing is dropped and things are added on. And vouchers, now you're placing more control of the government to determine consumption. It's almost like food stamps and things like that. I think it introduces problems in the marketplace and such huge swings of monetary resources. I think we're adding complexity when what we need is more simplification. So I don't think I'm a real big fan of national or fair tax. Mm-hmm. I think there's some good thoughts in there, and I think that there's some good outcomes to further thought as well. But just inventing new taxes, and I think a flat tax or a national sales tax is very tough lower income people. I mean,
well,
it
flat
affects
tax,
more than
I
higher
think, would
income
be,
people.
yeah.
Well, the solution was to do this rebate, this instant rebate or something like that. I did do a little research into it, and the more I read it, the less comfortable I am in its current structure. I don't think it's 100% wrong, but I don't think it's nearly, right as it exists. So I'm glad to see people thinking outside the box a little bit too.
No, absolutely, and now there's lots of different issues that people should be considering that aren't brought up to debate. Well, one thing is that we live in the 21st century, and the Constitution's outdated. But let me ask you this: now, even with the technology, do you find a difference between illegal searches and seizures to someone's house compared to their computer, or is it the same principle?
Well, I think if we're going to be historical, it would be like opening someone's mail. And there are actual laws about that. So, and again, with the full realization that, again, in the data networks that we have now, anyone can hack into anything at any time, given enough time, money, and expertise. That doesn't make it right. Just like anybody can, pull mail out of my mailbox in the front of my house and read my mail if they wanted to. There's nothing preventing them from doing that other than this abstract social contract that's just not done.
Now, the Internet has evolved in a way where, actually it's pretty well self-regulated, I would say. I mean, there are, you hear about these viruses that go wild, but they're pretty much taken care of pretty early just by, ingenuity, open source, people getting together. But as far as, the concerns that somehow hackers are going to shut down, like the Department of Defense and stuff like that, or nuclear reactors, shouldn't those types of things be on their own network and not be hacked in, like be on the World Wide Web? Shouldn't they be on a private network?
I'll just one word: Stuxnet. We would think that the Iranian nuclear equipment was not network aware, and in fact, it wasn't. The Stuxnet virus that was attacking the Siemens systems in Iran were not network aware. They were not on any public or even private networks, for that matter, other than their own production facilities. But those viruses were introduced just as well, through espionage or whatever. So to think that by isolating these systems or having private networks and things like that is the answer, I think is in this day and age a little naive. There's always holes, there's always backdoors, and there's always humans that can access things. So I think we need to be realistic about things like that. So we start segmenting networks, we start, breaking things out. There's a law of unintended consequences that arise there as well. But from a security standpoint for nuclear facilities and just regular conventional power grids and things like that, yeah, we've got to have the best defenses as we can. Is it going to be completely invulnerable? Probably not. But as anything, we do the best we can.
Well, okay. And the thing is, do you believe like there should be internet censorship? Should people have due process? Like if you're accused of doing a copyright violation, before they can should there be a process instead of just, because this is what SOPA was, which they kind of said they're going to get back to it because there's a lot of people calling in that were opposed to SOPA, the Stop Online Privacy Act, which was being discussed in Congress, and there's a Senate version, PIPA. The problem really wasn't protecting copyrights. It was that you would be guilty until proven innocent, and then your website would be shut down until you could prove yourself innocent.
Right. Well, we have the CISPA stuff coming out of international treaties now, and that seems to be the new tactic of this administration, is to sign international treaties instead of going through regular legislation in this country. Well, I'm of two minds. I think when an artist develops a piece of music or a work of art, they should, and they are available commercially, they deserve some compensation for that. Now, what that compensation is, at what level, I don't know. That's for the market to determine. But to just have it randomly stolen doesn't benefit anybody. I have clients in my tech business that, the people will be downloading free music, and as a musician myself, I don't I don't publish anything, but I have a lot of friends who do. I feel bad for those artists who have really had a miserable existence, really, when you look at it. In a lot of cases, they really live for their art and not much else.
I can understand that.
To get a little bit of compensation, so pay $1 for the song, for crying out loud, and don't introduce these viruses into your computer by illegally downloading. I tell my clients, I'm like, you're paying me now hundreds of dollars to fix this thing. How much did you really save by not paying for that music directly instead, going to a shared site or a download site that's riddled with viruses? You have to look at the total economics. So, at least in terms of my clients, they pretty much understand that at this point, particularly the ones who had to pay me to fix their system.
But at the same time, you wouldn't want someone to accuse someone and be able to shut down their site before they're...
No, I think due process is due process. You prove your case, then fine them, do whatever the law dictates. But no, just slamming the hammer on somebody and shutting them down for innuendo, I don't think that's not going to work. Just not going to work.
Yeah, because, if that was a law, that could set a precedent, too, across the country. People could just accuse everyone of anything, and then they could just go to jail or something, before the trial. That would totally change how we do justice here. Now, in closing, just two other things real quick. What do you think there should be different kinds of election laws, from an independent third-party perspective here?
Well, they vary from state to state. So do we want national election laws? Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that there's a lot of funny business going on in the election laws. Certainly there are in the state of Delaware. They are in motion. There do seem to be a lot of voter suppression efforts going on in this country. So I think there's some benefit to having some minimum standards that we all can live with. And other than that, it's hard to dictate what the states will do, but it certainly is rising to the surface, both with electronic voting and now the gerrymandering of some of the election laws in all the states and access to voters. I think there's some ground there to create at least some minimum standards.
Yeah, you can't legislate people getting up and not being lazy. If people really want change, the police are still there. But at the same time,
it's fine if you don't vote.
now the big parties, though, they are nonetheless they are doing stuff like district mandering and things like that. There's no doubt that they are passing laws to make it harder and harder, and especially getting on the debates, which I think is so critical. And so basically, someone who a politician running for an office who doesn't want to debate, that's like I don't know, a mechanic without a toolbox or something, or Santa without his sleigh. You should want to debate. Now, here's a kind of a fun question as well. Do you have any past favorite presidents or politicians, sir?
Wow. There's a few people that have done some really marvelous things. I think in Delaware here we had a governor, Russell Peterson. He's a Democrat from way back in the 70s, and he did a lot of environmental work when the environmental movement was getting started then. Did some really beneficial things for this state. He's still alive. I have a lot of respect for him. Presidentially, nobody really stands out. I think Harry Truman, is a pretty good example of somebody sticking to his guns, and although we're all but weak mortals and have our moments as well. So I think just the general study of all these people is very beneficial. To pick one would be very difficult for me to do. So I don't really have any of those alter egos that I like to emulate. I think the study of what some of the challenges were when you look at Kennedy's administration and how, basically the third year of his presidency, he was trying to go back to the silver standard, gold standard, producing Treasury notes instead of Federal Reserve notes. He was actually starting to compete with the Federal Reserve. Very interesting stuff, and I don't think the story's been completely told of that whole chapter right there.
I don't think so either. I don't think a lot of people think that. I think, what about, I mean, should we have the freedom of information to know if there are classified things about that from 40 years ago?
There's a lot of really good stuff, and I think, there's a lot to learn from the past. Certainly that can give us a sense of caution going forward, and I think absorbing as much of that is probably where I'm at. Rather than picking one person, I think looking at the successes and failures of all these people. Because they're smart people. These are not untalented people in some way, and what they have to go through to get to where they are is a product of their times. So I think it's good to observe that. And
that kind of goes with your theme. Instead of just one issue being isolated, which a lot of people like to look at, and you can to some degree, but it's just kind of the same thing here. It's kind of a holistic approach. Do you have just kind of any final thoughts here on this July 4th? And actually, if people want to show some support, especially if you're in Delaware, but across the country, because you will be a U.S. senator, it's Andrew Groff. Andrew, A-N-D-R-E-W, Groff, G-R-O-F-F. FOR, Senate.us, Andrew Groff with 2 F's, and then FOR, Senate.us. And so, sir, I kind of ask it, like, do you have a vision that you would like to share with us today?
I think in reflecting on the 4th, I think we have to understand what we're celebrating on the 4th. And it's not only our independence as a country from another tyrant, but our independence as a free people, and to understand that people of many, many, many thousands and maybe even millions of people have given their lives for these ideals, and it's incumbent upon us to remember that and to practice those same things. Democracy and freedom is something that is constantly struggled for, because I think that's our better angels, but I think in our basic nature we tend to be a little more authoritarian as a species. So it takes extra and hard work to stay free, and I think that's what this day is about, as well as the hot dogs and the fireworks.
Excellent, and that's so true. I just as I like that thought that you said there. There's been millions of people who have given their lives for a reason. I mean, people need to ask themselves why. And that's why these civil liberties laws, like our Bill of Rights, our whole entire Constitution, are so important. That's why, some people consider the Patriot Act an abomination. That's why, I would say whoever voted for the NDAA, is committing contempt. I mean, not just, they're not just ignorant. They're actually committing contempt if they are that ignorant to even run for office. And so November 6, 2012, and I hope you have some people calling people out on people that wouldn't want to debate you. Maybe you can have your own, like, little James Carville who will call these people for what they are. Cowards and not accountable. And they don't want to give you the full choices. They just want to ride on just on the low turnout that they hope happens again. But this is the year. We swung back. We've had a full House of Republicans with Bush. And there was a full legislator that he had to work with that were all Republicans. Obama had a full legislator, Democrats, his first 2 years. So there's no more excuses, and we can see that. That's why, the media is like, well, people don't know what they want. They elect Republicans and Democrats. Well, it's neither. Now we do have some choices, and I think you're far better choice, and actually you're a good choice. Even it's not even a lesser of two evils. And Andrew, I thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have an excellent holiday. And
Thank you.
Good Fourth. It's been a pleasure, and I'll say goodbye to you after this interview. And thanks again, sir.
Okay, thank you.